I'm very, very excited to have the opportunity to interview my next guest, clinical psychologist for the Department of Education in Hawaii, Dr. Tolly Amaxopoulos. And he is going to shed some light on how parents can raise their kids without feeling that frustration and feeling like a failure. I think as a mom, I too also feel like a failure when I feel my daughters who are adults, I mean 18 and 24, when our kids don't do what we think they should do. How do we cope with that without damaging our kids' mental health and their self-esteem?
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's something a lot of parents are going through, right? Because it's just like you mentioned earlier, right? The grades aren't really up to date. You're not sure which side to really listen to, right? Are they taking these extended? Are they just shutting their cameras off and not engaging in classes? But yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere. So usually, I think regular check-ins. I think the last talk I gave just mentioned that, right? Just making sure everyone's on the same page and depending on the age group, if you've got teenagers, they're going to want to be
Mhm.
more independent. But I think what a lot of parents overlook is just general temperament. Some kids really don't do well with a lot of oversight, and sometimes they really struggle even if there is oversight, right? So there's usually a better way to talk to, I think, all teenagers. And when I work with parents and some of the therapists in the school, it's so easy to tell somebody what to do, right? And if it was that easy, we'd probably all be out of work, right? Because it's just do your homework.
Right.
Done deal. 4.0 student. Um, but for the most part, people are generally resistant to any kind of criticism, right? So if a kid hears anything, or actually kids, adults,
Mhm.
if somebody criticizes our driving, we're likely to defend it rather than be like, oh yeah, I should really do this or that instead. So usually, it's like that quote, right? Seek first to understand and then to be understood. I recommend a lot of parents to take a little bit more of a compassionate view. It's not easy being a kid. You couldn't pay me enough to be 14 again
Right.
and start from there. I would never want to do that. And I think sometimes when parents disclose their own experiences with school and their own struggles, I've worked with a lot of kids where they're shocked to hear that their parents didn't like school or they struggled as well. And usually that's the first part of the bridge is just kind of, connecting and redirecting. Hey, I get it, but here's what we got to do. And another thing that I kind of see is, and this actually goes back to some research on conflict management, where you've got these groups of people that have a disagreement, usually in kind of an organization,
Mhm.
and they'll come up with an agreement that everyone feels like it's a good fit. This is the direction we should all move in, and then usually people don't revisit it. So it's actually really common. You think it would make sense, but parents do the same thing. Everyone's kind of on board. Where yeah, these are the 4 assignments you got to do today, and then we'll just kind of things will work out. But usually, it's the best predictor of future behavior is usually past behavior. So sometimes it takes a little more scrutiny. But if you don't have a personality match for whatever reason, it's going to be a little more difficult. But I mean, that's usually, I think, a good starting point.
So what happens when there's 20 plus assignments with 2 weeks left in the quarter? Actually, this week is the last week of school.
Yeah.
So when you accept that your child will probably get an F since there are more than 20 assignments that are past due, how can a parent calmly have a discussion without losing it? A lot of moms, well, I'm sure dads too, they're losing it to the point of saying a lot of mean things.
Hmm.
How do you calmly have this talk with your teenager?
Yeah. So everyone, every kid I happen to work
Is
with,
it possible?
yeah, that they're in that boat. Yeah. So I think it's kind of a philosophical thing too, right? Because even if you're probably going to get an F, do you still keep trying till the last minute? Well, I think that kind of resilience is really tough to build. So I think if you've got a kid in that situation where all these assignments are due, there's only a couple weeks left in the quarter. Um, you know, Kids are really overwhelmed,
Hmm.
and there's really great distractions nowadays, right? YouTube, video games. It's so easy to not deal with the overwhelm that they're feeling.
Yes.
And also too, I mean, there's a lot of kids that have depression, anxiety, where there is that kind of pervasive hopelessness, right? Where nothing I really do matters. And I work with enough kids now where they're kind of shocked to believe that, wow, I can actually get into college with a really bad 10th or 11th grade GPA. But yeah, I mean, once they start feeling hopeless, it's really tough to get that motivation going. And the thought is, in a lot of kids, well, next semester it's going to be my time to shine. But yeah, it's really, I think, that the day-to-day kind of discipline that parents can try to instill that we all strive for too, right? Because our lives are busy as well. But yeah, there's no way out of that one. I mean, I recommend the kids stay in contact with the teachers, right? Or the parents be the advocate as well. I mean, I always prefer, if the kid's old enough, they should email their teachers. And, full honesty, I think, is the best policy. Hey, I slipped up. I had it's been a terrible semester, a quarter for me. I know I have all these assignments due. What can I do? And, from what I've seen, some teachers are really pretty strict with, hey, this is how life works. But for the most part, you'd be surprised how many teachers would really want to, see a kid succeed and allow that late work to come in. But yeah, I think getting in touch with the teachers, and most kids are ultra resistant to that, right? Because they're fearful that it's one more adult that's going to basically tell them, hey, you had all this time, they've heard it all before. So they're usually pretty shocked when the teachers are like, yeah, just get it to me by midnight on this date. And they're like, oh my God, now they've got kind of a fire underneath them and they're ready to go. But, usually the best start is probably, just staying with it throughout the quarter. But it's tough. I mean,
so like this week though, how can a parent have that conversation without losing it, accepting? I had a couple moms email me and say, you know what, there will definitely be at least 2 Fs, the rest Ds. I'm going to kill him. How do you get them? What should I say?
Yeah. So it's counterintuitive, but I would tell them to take a long, brisk walk, sleep on it, reflect on their own experiences of, have they ever been in a situation that seemed kind of insurmountable? And then the next day, I mean, you got to strike when the iron is cold. And usually that's kind of with some kind of healthy disclosure, like, nonviolent communication is great, right? Observation, feeling, need, request. Hey, I noticed.
Can you explain that nonviolent communication?
Sure. Yeah. It was created in the 70s. It's this way where it's a style of communication where you lower somebody's defenses so they're not critical. And the idea behind it is, hey, I noticed you got 1 million assignments due by midnight. Right. That's observation. Feeling, I'm really worried. I'm frustrated. And, like you mentioned, parents might be internalizing it, right? I feel like a failure. I'm really angry. We're paying all this money. Maybe it's a private school or something. And then the need is, that's something that parents got to reflect on. Why are the grades so important? Is it that they want this kid to have the best opportunity at all? Is it there's some pride associated with here's my kid doing these big things, but they've got to kind of reflect on what the real need is there. And if it's that need for, hey, I want you to have the best shot at a scholarship, or I want you to have every opportunity in front of you. That need would be, hey, I want you to be self-sufficient. It's really important for me that you can, sustain your own life in all areas, right? And then the request is, hey, would you be willing to do a couple of these assignments tonight? And, I wouldn't say it's quite a Hail Mary, but it's, it's a 3rd and 7 or 8. It's a.
Okay, so if they say, you know what, I have 20, Mom, they're due by midnight. I'm not doing it because it's just too much. So I'm fine with the F. You always said, if I'm fine with it, you're fine with it. So just leave me alone. What's the response to that?
Yeah. So that's when you double back and you say, I know I said that I was angry, but yeah, you got to double back on that comment. And really just, hey, I said it out of anger. That's not really how I feel. I'm not really okay with you getting Fs. I was just frustrated at the time. And I know on some level you're probably worried about this too. I know it can be totally cool because nobody really wants to fail at anything, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, at that point, I'd say, hey, well, maybe we can figure this thing out. What do you got to do? I'll see if I can get this thing organized for you, and see if you can get as collaborative as possible. But yeah, I mean, that's a long shot. If a kid's really saying, I don't care if I fail, um, I don't know if I would take that at face value. I think what
Because
I'm
they
hearing
do
is,
care, right? They do care.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd say for the most part, unless there's some other kind of underlying pathology, right, or like some serious, depression or anxiety. For the most part, yeah, I don't think at the core that's a full-hearted kind of statement. It's more, I'm overwhelmed. There's no way I can catch up anyway, so I'm going to pretend not to care,
Mhm,
which
mhm.
not the best coping strategy, right? It's like
Is there
denial.
something in particular during this pandemic that seems to be, like a common, not problem, but a common issue that teens are facing, especially the like middle school to high school? Because it's very different, right? The new normal in education is different from
Yeah,
what it was.
it is. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little gender-based too. I mean, with teenagers, with girls and boys especially, right? Girls have that influx of estrogen,
Hmm.
and that's going to create a need for closeness and connection. So when you take them out of that environment where they're around a lot of different people and a lot of things happening, usually it's going to lead to some kind of anxiety or kind of depressive symptoms, right? Because they're just not getting that regular connection that they have. So a lot of that, a lot of peers, a lot of the students that we're working with, they're not sure who their friends are right now. They're really offended that they're not, invited into these things, and they're seeing some, they invited some friends, but they didn't invite me, and it's a lot of just internalizing. So we're seeing a lot of that in the schools.
So what about with Zoom though? Because they're not really having actual parties or get-togethers. Do you notice that even through, I don't know, are they having Zoom birthday parties, or they're still feeling not part of it? Is it not being included? Is that part
I'm
of
not,
the?
yeah, I'm not totally sure how those are working, but I know it's better than nothing, and I know teachers are getting better at the breakout rooms. They're doing a little
Mhm,
better
mhm.
with kind of monitoring those and setting them up. But yeah, for the most part, it seems like the world is just kind of winging it right now, and everyone's suffering to some degree. So yeah, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that's something I'm sure we'll be exploring for a long time,
Are the
right?
teens that you work with sharing what their fears are or their anxieties? I mean, what's causing their behavior?
Sure. I mean, a lot of it's they're just not sure where they stand, right? Socially or academically. A lot of what we're hearing is, my parents are saying, well, you're behind 10 assignments. And the kid's saying, well, it's not updated yet. And
Yes.
just a lot of that. So no one, and socially, same thing too, right? They're not sure what they can be doing. And especially here in Hawaii, where there's a lot of people in homes, right? Sometimes
Hmm,
it's that
hmm.
multiple generations. So kids are going to feel guilty, or some feel guilty, right, if they go out and kind of expose themselves to increase their social life, right? They could be
Right.
bringing things home, right? So yeah, I'm just a lot of that. Just people aren't really sure, or the kids really aren't sure where they're at in kind of those areas.
What do you think is challenging in the classroom? Because I know sometimes it's hybrid, and I've known, some kids like at Milani Middle, they go once a week.
Hmm.
How do you think that's impacting the emotional well-being when you're going to school once a week and then the other 4 days virtual?
Sure.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of, I mean, the tutoring is crazy. From your perspective, from the mental mindset, how is that affecting our kids, just their learning experience?
Well, the introverts are in the world are rejoicing. The
Right,
introverts
right.
are loving going to school one day a week. The introverted kids, and now they're realizing more than ever how much they're introverted, right? Even going for the first day is like, oh my God, it's
Right.
overwhelming. So those kids are thriving because they're not very involved, right? Or they don't get their motivation and energy from these large interactions. The extroverts, though, they're not doing so hot this past year. So we're seeing a lot of that too. It's just they're not doing their sports like they want to. They're not engaging with their teachers, in close proximity and their peers. So yeah, those folks aren't doing very well, unfortunately.
What kind of tips do you give them to help them cope with it?
Yeah, well, I give everybody pretty much the same tip. Exercise every single day, no matter how old you are, just because um, there's a part of our brain called it's actually right beneath our frontal lobe, or in that area. It's called the anterior cingulate gyrus, and it's considered our brain's gear shifter. And, if we're not, humans are just built to move. So what they're finding is if we don't move enough at all ages, our brains kind of do some funny stuff, and usually not in the good direction, right? It's just a little more of some of the negative symptoms. So everybody should be moving probably as much as they can right now with the increased stress hormones that we just need to kind of basically metabolize out of our bodies, right? So kids, adults, as safely as they can. And, there's, risks to going to the gym. Kids aren't, typically going to want to go there, but if families can start walking together, doing more physical things on the weekends. John Rady, he wrote Spark. He's a pretty brilliant researcher on, just children's mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I think he pegged the number at, 60 minutes a day, 6 days a week for teens.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. So who can do that? But we got to find a way. But I think that's probably the single most important thing you can do, because after you exercise, right, you're going to want to eat healthier typically, right? You're going to want to, drink more water, things like that, kids should be doing anyway. So it's kind of a good all around regulator. So if nothing else, it's hard to find a really depressed person exercising or running, that does it regularly.
Right. So isn't that hard though, when you are experiencing depression, to motivate them to exercise, which they need in order to motivate them to do schoolwork? That's where.
Yeah, that's the trick. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If we could figure that one out. I've worked with some pretty severely depressed folks, and that can take quite a long time to elicit that kind of change. And because the concept we're kind of working with here is it's called cognitive dissonance. It's the idea that you got two of these beliefs in your brain, right? The depressed person knows they should exercise, and they also know that they really don't want to.
Right.
And you just have to really explore with them and embrace, hey, why don't you want to? There's a million reasons, right? It's boring. I'm going to sweat. I don't have exercise clothing. And then why do you want to? And basically move them up that kind of ladder of taking some kind of action. But yeah, that's the $1 million question. How can you get kids to exercise? John Rady did it with, I think, a grant. He went to schools in Chicago. He basically said, hey, the kids are going to run every single morning, multiple miles, and I want to see what happens after a few months. And then that led to that school becoming kind of a top performer. And then he went to other schools and kind of replicated it. But yeah, but that involved groups, right? And peer competition. There's a lot.
Right. But when it's solo.
Yeah. So I think maybe like a nightly walk or something like that, or a family jogging together might be a good bet.
Yeah, we were trying to take the dogs out, like even if it's at 9 or 10 at night. It's like, you know what?
Yep.
Let's just and you just say just 10 minutes or 7 minutes. And then you slowly, you're walking further from home. So it takes a little longer, but it's almost like getting them outside of the house, because they're either too tired or they have a stomach ache or they're not feeling well.
Yeah.
And there's a zillion reasons. Do you hear that? Like, why did you exercise this week? Maybe their goal, 15 minutes. Did you go? No. Have you been hearing?
No, that's what's happening. Yeah, that's the struggle right there. There's if I wish I had an answer for you, honestly, because if I could get folks to move, or it would just, or kids especially, it would solve a lot of problems. But there's also self-consciousness too. As you get older, you just care less generally, I think, what people think. But kids are, extremely self-conscious, right? So they're always thinking people are staring at them, thinking about them.
Yes.
And, it's actually called, the phenomenon is called imaginary audience, where they always think somebody's
watching. I love
watching.
that. Yeah, well, because when my 18-year-old was 15, she said, I'm just going to go in the yard in circles, because she didn't want to go outside because someone might watch her.
Yeah.
Before school. So she woke up, we were like, what is that noise? And it was like 6 a.m. and she was just basically running around like in our yard. And I said, who's going to be up at 6:15 in the morning? But just in case, I guess someone looked at her. But I love that imaginary audience.
Yeah, well, it has a genetic evolutionary advantage too, right? Because 2 million years ago, you would not want to get kicked out of a tribe. you'd want to be self-conscious and monitor your, what do they call it? The social, basically how folks respond to you, strangers and stuff. So there's, that's why humans are so sensitive to any kind of rejection, right? Because it's extremely painful because, a couple
So they
million
need to
years
be
ago.
accepted, whether it is
Sure, yeah.
academic or socially or. Wow, thank you so much. So is there any
Sure.
closing parent tip that can help save our sanity during maybe the holidays? Because I think a lot of us sometimes don't even want to do the holidays because it's like added stress.
Sure. Yes.
How do we
Go for
handle
a
the
walk.
holidays?
Go for a walk right now.
Go for a walk right now. And
Yeah.
also like the disappointment of, I want I don't know, an Xbox and this and this and this. And then during the holidays, I notice a lot of the parents, I can't. I mean, how do you explain to your kids you can't have $1,000 iPhone, or how do you justify or say something that won't result in, I mean, I know sometimes you can't stop the rolling eyes, but how do you explain that you cannot have the fill in the blank? Is there some way to?
Sure. Yeah. I think any kind of honest disclosure is healthy. I mean, I think parents can say, yeah, I wish I could get this for you, but we've got more people. Yeah, I don't know. Someone lost their job, or we just can't afford it this year. I mean, I think, the closest you can get to what's really happening, probably the better, because kids are great detectors of what's actually happening, right? They can when something's just a little bit off. So yeah, I think the closest, I mean, I think it's, saying you can't have this, you just can't have it versus I wish I could get it for you, but
I love that. That is a total different feel. I wish I could get it for you instead of, you know what? No, stop asking for it. No, you're not going to get it. No, no, no. And then you just feel so closed off.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know if we have time, but it might actually feel familiar, but I guess we'll explore that and maybe the next one. Yeah, because sometimes people will enact certain kind of emotional climates that are familiar. So if people have really kind of bad holidays or depressing holidays, they might push people away. Their words might be a little edgier, and now they've got this kind of familiar holiday once again. And but that's a whole different.
Well, and it's almost like a default, right? It's a default because you keep hearing, can I have this? Can I have this? Can I have this? And then during Christmas time, it almost quadruples because you feel like saying, and I only have two, but if you have 5 little ones saying, well, can I have this? Well, can I have this? You just want to say, no, everyone, no, we are canceling Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, but the slight change could be helpful, but I mean,
wish I could.
Yeah, I'd love to, yeah, I like that too, but sometimes it's just been a difficult year, and hopefully it gets better next year. I mean, and the cool thing is about this whole nonviolent connect and redirect stuff is it doesn't mean that kids are just going to be like, oh, okay, great, no Xbox.
Right.
They can still be frustrated, but you're just kind of being real with them, and they can sit with that and deal with it on their own or with your support. But ultimately, they know exactly kind of where things stand, and that's usually, I think, more helpful, actually.
Well, it's a more peaceful interaction, right? You're not yelling. You're not saying, geez, you don't appreciate everything else that I give you. And then it becomes a conflict rather than, like you said, a non-violent way of communicating.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I know you've been really, really busy, and I really appreciate this time. And I got through saying your name.
Yeah, you nailed it. Good job.
Okay, take care.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.